Tundra Media presents The Mayor Helps, with the Mayor of Victoria, British Columbia, Lisa Helps. Have your say. Send your questions and comments to themayorhelps.com. They could be included in next week's
Victoria
show.
Businesses to know that we're working.
And now, here's your host, from beautiful Victoria, British Columbia, Dave Hatt.
Well, welcome to the 6th episode of The Mayor Helps. Good morning, Mayor Helps. It's been quite a week, hasn't it?
It sure has, Dave.
So as businesses start to reopen slowly from the COVID restriction, we've all been smacked in the face with the brutal ugliness of racism by cop in the States. I know that situations are different in Canada, and we've been, as a people and as many, the three layers of government, been very proactive at trying to move past racism and enter into open discussions. And certainly with First Nations, the truth and reconciliation process has been happening. But I did want to speak with you because you are in power. You are part of the system. And by nature of your position, you're also chair of the board of the local police force. So I wanted to ask you point blank, what are some of the things that are done in Victoria to ensure that our police are fully integrated or more fully integrated into our community as the members of the public that they are?
Well, in terms of the police, one of the things that the Victoria Police Department initiated some years ago, and I think that the provincial program that was created was based on what the work done in Victoria, but every officer in the Vic PD is required to take anti-bias training, bias awareness. So there's training that each Vic PD officer does, because we all have biases. They're ingrained biases. They're from, for those of us who have white skin and are privileged, they come from that blindness of being white and not experiencing racism. So the police department, each officer is trained, and hopefully not just once. In terms of the police being integrated into the community, I think just a couple of examples. The police department is located quite close to the mosque on Quadra Street, and the Vic PD officers and some of the folks at the mosque have an annual or more than once a year soccer game. And again, it seems kind of trite to say the police are playing soccer with Muslim youth, but it's not trite, because there's an opportunity for real connection in that. The police also are working, historically there's a terrible relationship, a colonial relationship between all police departments and Indigenous peoples in this country. And the Victoria Police Department has been working very closely with the Aboriginal Coalition to End Homelessness. Again, things like going to Victoria Royals games, that's our hockey team here, with the police officers, not in uniform obviously, but going to see hockey games with members of the Indigenous street community, again building those human-to-human relationships. So there's more work to do. I wouldn't say that all bad things happen in the United States and we're perfect here. And I think also one of the things that's really important for me this week is it's very easy to focus on police and say police are racist. And, and obviously the things that we're seeing in the States, that is true. Some of the things we see here, that is true. But I think to point at the police absolves the rest of us from responsibility for racism. There's racism in Victoria. There's subtle racism. There's racism against international students who want to find permanent jobs after they graduate. There's all sorts of subtle ways that subtle and not so subtle ways that racism plays out in our community. And I think it's way bigger than the police. And we'll be issuing a statement later to do something with that.
It's good to hear, because originally my family's from Halifax, and my mother tells stories about growing up and having my grandfather take her to the dump where they would unload stuff from the house. He was a construction guy, a carpenter, and Africville was right there. And, that was my mom's experience of Black people. They lived next to the dump in Halifax. It was horrible. It was absolutely terrible. And then I grew up in Edmonton, and I remember I worked downtown at the Hilton, and my experience with many First Nations was they were in a horrible state of mind. And, I can't even imagine what looking back on it, because we didn't have the awareness, but I can't even imagine what they went through residential schools, what their families went through residential schools. So I completely agree in that it's not just a police pointing fingers, but I did want to shine a light because it's been my experience that Victoria has done a proactive and a good job with you at the helm. And so I just wanted to make sure that you were given an opportunity to address that.
Yeah, thank you. And not perfect, and there's always more work to do. I mean, anti-bias training is good, but once in a career is not good. Once every year, every 2 years is good. And another thing that's happened very recently at the police department, and it was so moving to actually hear this presentation. I'm trying to remember it. I can't remember if it's the Aboriginal Coalition to End Homelessness or the Coalition to End Homelessness. Anyways, there's a program that started that VicPD is participating in, and the anti-bias training is something that all officers do, and it's kind of programmatic, and I don't want to say bureaucratic, but and I haven't taken the course, so it may not be like that at all. But the other thing that the police have been doing is working with young Indigenous women through either the Aboriginal Coalition or the Coalition to End Homelessness, and hearing their life stories, hearing their life experiences. It's some really kind of in-person anti-stigma training, and it is absolutely transformational. We had 2 of these young women come and present to the police board to share the work they've been doing with the department, and it was so moving because all they do, I shouldn't say all they do, what they do, I'll come back to all they do in a moment. What they do is they simply tell their life story. This has been my experience being a young Indigenous woman living in Victoria. This is my story. And stories are absolutely powerful. So you can have all of the anti-bias workbook training and Zoominars or whatever, but actually having our police department, our officers exposed to some of those stories is transformational, and we'll continue to do that.
That sounds good, and it makes a lot of sense. Thank you very much for your time, and we'll see you on the other side of our break.
See you then.
Thanks.
Have your say. Send your questions and comments to themayorhelps.com. They could be included in next week's show.
Okay, welcome to Ask the Mayor, where members of our community submit questions to our website at themayorhelps.com and zoom them in to ask the mayor a question. Our first question comes from Katyanna Ryan at Ma Yoga. Is that correct?
That's right.
Introduce yourself to the mayor and go right ahead and ask her a question.
Hello, Mayor Helps. It's really nice to meet you. My name is Katyanna. And my question for you, it's kind of a 2-part question actually, is we're having a lot, my partner and I have been talking a lot just about practices within leadership and how people who have more higher stress jobs are actually coping with the stress of COVID-19. And so my question for you is, how do you check in with yourself and also the people that work with you about their stress levels and how they're handling it? And also whether or not you implement any kind of mindful-based practices into like the workflow of your day.
Great question. The answer, they're kind of related, so I'll just dive right in. In terms of my own mindfulness-based practices and stress management, I live pretty close to City Hall, and before COVID hit, I would just get on my bike and ride here. And if all the lights are green, it's literally about a 6-minute bike ride. And so one of the things I really noticed that I needed was more space between work and home. And so I started walking back and forth. And it was really interesting. Last week, I had to bike for two days in a row, and I really noticed an impact on my mental health, on the spaciousness inside of me. So I'm like, okay, right, you must walk back and forth, because then it's about 20 minutes, and I get to stop and talk with people along the way who I wouldn't have if I'm just whizzing past on my bike. So that's been one thing, walking instead of biking. Also in the mornings, I have get up and kind of get ready to go, but I do some yoga and some meditation before leaving my home every day. Just again, for me, it's really about spaciousness and holding space inside myself. If I've got that, literally like the ability to breathe in and breathe out and create that spaciousness inside myself, then I feel like I have the capacity to hold a heck of a lot more out in the world. Well, and out in the world right now means at City Hall.
Yeah.
So those are some of the things that I do personally, and I try to be pretty rigorous about it. Like, it's really easy to say, oh, I'm not going to do my yoga practice this morning, or I'll just skip meditation. But I actually feel like I'm way less effective if I do that. And then in terms of here at City Hall, there are so few staff right now. And so the staff that I'm in contact with on a daily basis really encourage them to do similar things. And they do. It's interesting. There's a couple of people who've started walking and biking and walking and biking together when they wouldn't have before. And then, and those are the staff that are right here. And then in terms of, like, I don't have direct oversight of all of the staff in the city, but I'm asking our city manager on a very regular basis, how are people doing working from home, and kind of keeping my fingers on that pulse.
Okay, wonderful. That's really good to hear. And do you think that when things are up and running more, there'll be need to implement more kind of organized mindful-based practices at work?
Maybe. I mean, it's a really, I've been kind of mulling that over in my mind for a long time. You know, we've got a giant space upstairs that, you know, could we have like Monday morning meditation and Wednesday afternoon yoga practice right at City Hall? I don't know. You know, our staff actually organized their own yoga classes out in Centennial Square a couple of years ago. They would be out there at lunchtimes. So maybe it's more giving the message that those kinds of things are welcome and supportable rather than, you know, my office organizing them.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much. That's great. It's really good to hear about your kind of experiences with stress management. It's a lot going on right now.
Sure. And thanks for the very generous question. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Katyanna. Appreciate it. Take care.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
See you later.
Our second question comes from Kate Shelton of Tonic Boutique here in Victoria. And Kate, introduce yourself to the mayor and go right ahead.
Hi, Lisa. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Even though we're Fernwood neighbors, it's a tight community and you don't always get to meet everyone. So it's a nice chance to meet you via Zoom.
Absolutely.
So my biggest question for you is in this reopening of all of our businesses and what that looks like for, say, a small community like Fernwood, where we have a lot of opportunities to close street space, open up some outside space for better distancing. From the city's perspective of how you would get that moving, are you waiving some of the protocols that usually have to go in place where you'd have to get every business's permission to close a street, or what is going to be the way that you execute those kind of rollouts?
That's a great question. We know that in order for businesses to not only survive, but also to thrive in this new reality, that businesses need more space, and particularly over the summertime, public space is wonderful for that purpose. So we gave our staff direction a couple of weeks ago to go away and be as creative as possible to kind of unleash public space for commercial activity, while at the same time, you know, making sure that there's room for people to move in various mobility mobility challenges and so on. So what day is it today? Wednesday. So if you check back on I'll tell you a bit more, but if you actually want to read everything that staff are proposing, they're working really hard right down to the wire. They'll be publishing their report later tonight, and I can get Dave to send you the link that addresses exactly that. More space in public, more sidewalk space, more street space, and our city manager put it in such a way which I really appreciated. She said it's going to be a little bit like organized chaos. You know, we're not going to get it right away. There will be people who say, like, I don't want that, or oh, actually that's kind of working well, once they see it happening. So we're going to be and council will be making these decisions tomorrow, and then you know, right after that, implementation will happen. So I think we're going to be as flexible as possible. We're going to make it as easy as possible. I forget, where is your exact business? As soon as you said the name of it.
I'm in the Fernwood Square, so between Mesa and, who's my other neighbor, Thistle and Wren.
Perfect. So you could just open your business right out into Fernwood Square.
I'll just pull my massage table right out into the square.
I would, without getting out ahead of staff, I would say, you know, probably as of Friday morning, just do it.
Yeah.
And I'm actually not being, you know, I think, you know, part of what our city manager is looking at is right now there's licenses required and patio licenses and this and that. And rather than changing all our bylaws, do we just have it just kind of happen organically, and our bylaw officers are busy doing other things? So I'm only being I actually think that probably, see what the report says, but as of Saturday morning, start massaging people in the square, and maybe Mesa's already got a good patio.
Yeah, it would be nice to see the square utilized quite a bit more, because it is a beautiful gathering space, and it already has the traffic calming measures there, because there is no other than bikes and pedestrians, but there's enough room to move around. It would be great to see more public art installed into the square, or many of the fun events that do happen in the square a little bit more frequently than, say, annually for Fernfest or
Well, and that's why I think there's a real opportunity for businesses like yours and others to use those public spaces, because Fernfest, for example, is not happening this year. Big events are not happening. And so why not have you and the other businesses out there using the space, attracting the public, drawing in new customers? And I know the two pubs across the street, or Fernwood Inn and Stage, are looking at closing that portion of Gladstone and opening out onto that street. So you can go hand out your massage pamphlets while people are having a beer on Gladstone.
Yeah. Who doesn't need a massage and beer? Seems like a win-win.
Exactly.
So it's going to be kind of the learn to do by doing method is how we're going to roll it out.
Learn to do by doing. That is one of my favorite methods. It's not always popular, but it sure gets things done.
Well, exactly, right? Like there is a time and a place to really study something, but there's also a time and a place to execute something and find out what's actually happening.
Yeah. So if you actually, let's just cut Dave out of it because he's busy enough. If you just email me, mayor@victoria.ca, then I'll have your email. And when the report publishes tonight, I'll send it your way.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. So after, say, we get a vaccine and things have, I don't want to say normalized because I don't think we'll ever go back to normal. Opening up these spaces, do you see that moving forward into the future as well?
Wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, I think we'll see what transformation looks like. And then once we, I mean, my feeling is that in our neighborhood centers and in our downtown, if we can have the feeling of kind of a vibrant open air market for this entire summer, maybe it's just something that sticks.
Yeah, it would be nice. It's always like when you're vacationing and you go to these, quite a bit in Europe where you have these open plazas with people everywhere and you don't know if they're with that business or this business, and somehow they manage it. So it's not like it's a foreign concept. It's just something new for here.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I look forward to it. I think it'll be good. And it's good timing. It's spring and summer. So
yeah. Thank you very much, Kate. I appreciate your time and your great questions.
Okay. Thanks so much, Dave.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Have your say. Send your questions and comments to themayorhelps.com. They could be included in next week's show. And now, Mayor Lisa Helps sits down with this week's special guest.
In this segment of The Mayor Helps, we have Brock Carlton, outgoing CEO of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. Good morning, Brock. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm doing well. First of all, I wanted to thank you for taking time to chat with us at The Mayor Helps. And it's been quite a week, hasn't it?
Seems like every week's quite a week these days. But yes, it has been a scary week, actually.
Yeah, it's been pretty ugly. It's raised a lot of issues for a lot of different people. And you've been at the FCM since the 90s, is that correct?
That's right, 28 years.
Yeah, I think, Brock, one of the strengths of FCM is that advocacy role. And certainly, in the last few years in particular, I'd say the last 5 or 6 years, we're part of FCM.
Yes.
A great,
the
grand we across the country have had the ability to really influence federal policy and federal decision making and federal budgets. And so kind of, probably 1 million people are asking you for a retrospective now that you're on your way to retirement. But what would you see are some of the key successes for local governments in your time as CEO there? And from a policy perspective, what are the big wins, and how have those impacted people living in cities across the country? And smaller communities as well. I mean, the benefit of FCM is that it's not a cities organization; it's a local government organization from coast to coast to coast.
So one can name a variety of federal programs and federal policies. You know, the National Housing Strategy is a great example of something that FCM had a huge influence in developing. Like when the Liberals ran in 2015, they did not have a national housing strategy in their platform. But we really helped with a few others shine a light on that and then help them evolve into the national housing strategy we currently have. So we can look at that as a marker. You can look at various infrastructure programs and the billions of dollars flowing to cities like Victoria and other cities and towns for general infrastructure, for roads, bridges, for public transit, those sorts of things. But I think there's two things that come to mind as real milestones. One was the gas tax transfer, which, just for anyone who's listening, is not related to the sale of gasoline. It's a label. It's $2.2 billion a year. It's a direct transfer from federal government to the municipalities. So it was a high watermark when it was first introduced, because it was the first time the federal government was transferring dollars directly into the hands of municipal government for work related to infrastructure or sustainability. But it created a model, because it is not a cost-sharing model. It is not a Fed-Prov agreement. It is a federal municipal transfer. It's a model that on which we build a lot of other advocacy work as not the panacea, but the best model we have for federal municipal relationships and federal investment in municipalities. So it's a great marker. The Harper government, it was brought in by the Liberals. The Harper government made it permanent, added an index of 2% a year. So it is the standard model that we aim at when we talk to federal government. So that's one thing. But from a broader perspective, the election in 2015 was a significant shift in time for us, because we changed the story. If you look at the story that FCM and the municipalities have been telling over the years, before 2015, we were telling a story of impoverishment. We didn't have enough money. We needed this, we needed that, we needed this. And it was all true, and it's still true. The trouble was the story wasn't a very compelling story, because it was a story of weakness. And we shifted the story in 2015 to be one of strength, of if you, the federal government, want to deliver your results in communities across this country, you need to invest in municipalities. And so suddenly the story wasn't about we need, but it was about this is important for the country, and this is why. It's about jobs, it's about local economic development, it's about environmental sustainability, it's about social cohesion. So we were able to talk about investing in solutions locally to national challenges. And that just changed the narrative completely, which opens the door to a whole range of conversations with the federal government about us being solutions, or part of the solution to the challenges they're trying to resolve. So those two things stand out as high watermarks and transition moments in the way the federal government and the municipalities work together.
So how do you feel about, what are some of your thoughts, I shouldn't say how do you feel, what are some of your thoughts around federal monies being transferred to small businesses that are clearly key members of our municipalities? And what do you experience or predict about the loans that are given to the small business now trying to rebuild our society and our economy out of the COVID?
Really important. I mean, the FCM and the mayors across the country stood up and said to the government, we support your initiative to support small business. It's really important for the survival. I mean, Mayor Helps and I were talking a while ago about the vibrancy of downtown Victoria, and the concern that because of the COVID crisis, you may end up having a much higher vacancy rate in your businesses in your downtown core. And so anything that government can do to help those small businesses remain viable and remain in the downtown cores is just part of the vibrancy of local communities in the downtowns of cities and towns across this country. So when the Prime Minister started releasing those kinds of programs early on, we were very supportive, and we kept pushing and advocating on behalf of those entities that needed support. So now we're saying, okay, it's kind of like our turn, because we've been supporting many others, and now we're looking at as our report a few weeks ago said, we're looking at a $10 to $15 billion operating deficit in municipalities across the country in the first 6 months period of this pandemic. Hopefully it's only 6 months, but that's the time frame we did the calculation on. And we're saying, municipalities cannot be viable players in the health and sustainability of communities if these operating deficits are not dealt with, and they can't deal with them. The only tool the municipalities have is raising property taxes, which is not a viable tool to recover billions and billions of dollars of operating losses. And so the federal government yesterday or the day before came out with their accelerating the payment of the gas tax, and it's great. It's generous. It's a step in the right direction, but it's only a step, because that money can't be used for operating money. It can only be used for infrastructure, for transit, those predetermined kinds of work. Can't be used for operating budgets and operating expenses. And so, as the Prime Minister said, and we hope he keeps true to his word, that this is the first step in a process to support municipal government. So we're really supportive of the business support the federal government has brought onto the table in terms for this COVID crisis. We're also saying, hey, don't forget us, because we have critical needs, and if our needs aren't met, services aren't going to be delivered, people are going to be laid off, and municipalities are going to take years and years and years to recover.
Yeah, and just to draw a line between all of this, when local governments are struggling, when we're laying people off, when we don't have operating revenues, when we're looking at, potentially giant tax increases, that has a negative and detrimental and immediate effect on our small businesses as well, because taxes go up. There are less customers with money in their pockets to go down to the local restaurant or the local pub. So really, I think one of the things that COVID has shown me, certainly if I didn't know it before, but I think many people, is that we really are all in this together. The federal government programs for local governments are great and benefit municipalities, certainly, because we don't have vacancies in our downtown. And so too does federal funding to municipalities, which, as Brock says, there's still much more needed. There's been no new money, just the gas tax contributed early. That will have significant impacts in a positive way if the local and provincial governments fund municipalities, have a positive impact on the business community and the business ecosystem.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, one of the interesting narratives I find in this COVID situation is historians talking about the fact that if you look at pandemics, any pandemic over the course of human history, they always seem to find the weaknesses in the existing society and go there and dig in deep and cause all kinds of trouble. And so you're looking at what's going on right now, and it's just shining a light on some of the inadequacies in our system, whether it's the support in long-term care facilities, or whether it's the support to municipal government and support to social housing and social housing and homelessness. Those are the places where the weaknesses are showing up as very vulnerable in this current moment. And the role of municipal government is important in helping overcome those weaknesses, but this COVID is also shining a light on the inadequacy of the fiscal framework in the country that doesn't leave the municipalities with the resources they need to do the frontline work that is so important in communities everywhere, of every size.
It's certainly tough, and I'm a small business owner besides this podcast, and one of the things we've been dealing with obviously is rent and the inability to pay our rent, and the program that the federal government came out with talking about how they'll support landlords with as long as they take on the 25% liability. I spoke with my attorney, and he said there's not a lot of landlords are stepping up to the plate to do that. So, as it relates directly to municipalities and funding municipalities, his thought was, in their law firm, there are a general consensus where there's going to be a lot more businesses over the next 60 days that are going to go under because they're just inability to pay their rent. So it's going to be, I mean, you can see the cascade effect in reverse as opposed to the trickle down. It's going to go from grassroots up.
Yeah. I mean, not only the rental challenge, but I can imagine as we start to open up the economy, businesses are not going to bounce back. The customers are not going to come back in the way that they did just pre-COVID. I would imagine it'll take time. I can imagine many small businesses don't have the luxury of that time to reestablish their client base and the business cycle they need for revenues and to keep viable.
Yeah, and an interesting point is energy as well. I spoke with a woman who owns a business. She's about my age, and she's like, "Man, I'm too old to restart this thing. I have to, but I'm too old to do it." So it's it relying heavily, I guess, on coping skills, coping mechanisms, and that would be a good place, I suppose, where municipalities would be able to work at continuing to build and reinforce the interconnectedness of the community, and so to help support each other.
Mm-hmm. Brock, before we let you go, I asked a question about the past kind of successes. What do you see as the future of local government, of municipalities in Canada? If you could kind of paint a picture of best case scenario, where do we go from here as local governments in our advocacy relationship with the federal government, but also in terms of the things that we are so good at delivering to our communities? What does your crystal ball say?
Well, part of the crystal ball says that it's going to be the federal, provincial, municipal dynamic is going to be a key feature in the next few years of discussions. And if we can move that yardstick, then I think that there'll be a lot more successes, not just successes for municipal government and for FCM, but for the country. And so I think that intergovernmental relationship dynamic is going to be a really difficult conversation, a necessary conversation, and obviously, hopefully, a successful conversation. I think the other question is going to be is the fiscal framework and the resources that municipalities need, because I just see. We all know that municipal governments play a key role in the social safety net in this country, whether it's the housing and homelessness files, whether it's just recreation and libraries and access to those kinds of facilities for people who are less fortunate. But the municipalities play a huge role in this, what we consider the social safety net in the country. And if the fiscal framework isn't realigned, it'll be harder and harder for the municipalities to sustain that role and expand that role in a way that is necessary. If you look at what I said earlier about COVID-19, finding the weaknesses in society, municipalities have an opportunity to be a key presence in overcoming those weaknesses. But to do that, they're going to need to maintain their energy and their focus on social services, and you're going to need to have fiscal resources to do that. So the crystal ball is that there's a tough years ahead in discussion on intergovernmental relationships, and there's the inevitability that municipalities are critical in this country. And what I find, I don't mean to self-ingratiate myself to you, Lisa, but I find that the current crop of mayors particularly in the big and medium-sized cities is a really impressive group of people who are oriented in ways that I think are to the benefit of communities. And I just hope that political presence and skill set remains as people come and go in their political lives. So there's a few thoughts. It doesn't give you the panacea, but a few things that are on my mind about the future. And I should say, I am leaving the chair and I'm leaving the organization, but I'm not leaving my commitment and passion to this stuff. So I'll be finding some way to continue to be present in in this world as we go forward.
That's great.
Well, thank you, Brock. Thank you very much for your time, and all the best and good luck in your next phase of your life, whatever it is you choose to do.
Thanks for this conversation. I think it's a really important one that we just continue these conversations and help the people become more aware of what we're all doing and how important it is.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I'd have to go out on a limb and say, yeah, we think so as well. Thank you very much. Take care, Brock. We'll see you.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining the Mayor Helps on Tundra Media. If you enjoyed the show, please like, share, and subscribe. And visit themayorhelps.com to submit your questions to the show.